I did one video and I said in that video, I said 78% or 76%, 78% or even up to 80% of white people that think they actually have privilege do not have privilege. Anyways, in this video, we'll digest all of that so that we'll come to a realization and a conclusion. Let's see how many persons are enjoying white privilege. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sonia. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're first tuning in, do subscribe, like this video, drop me a comment, and lastly, do not forget to share. Every stitches and videos we're going to use in our today's episode credit belongs to the original creators of this video, and so you can know this video is just for educational purpose, right? So let's just dive right into this video, and I'll be back with commentaries.
So let's talk about this, because while this person is clearly clueless and needs some education, let's talk about white privilege, because there was a time when I was absolutely certain that white privilege did not exist. And then in 2008, I was taking a class, and I won't go into the greeting card story, because I have talked about that numerous times here on my TikTok, and that was my first seed that came into my head that was like, oh, maybe white privilege does exist. The second two things that happened, I'm pretty ashamed of. So they asked us in class, the social work class that I was taking at the time, what we think it would be like to be a person of color. And specifically, they said, what do we think it would be like to be a person of color and walk into a store? And I'll remind you, this is when I was thinking white privilege doesn't exist. I grew up poor. I've had trauma. I've had blah, blah, blah. I was like, white privilege does not exist, because I did not feel like I was privileged growing up. And my first thought when they asked us that question was nope, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be a person of color and walking into a store. That dropped the second seed. So I was like, holy shit, there's got to be something to this. If I immediately don't want to even envision this scenario, there's got to be more to it. The third thing that happened, which I'm probably the most ashamed of, is I was reading our textbook, and our textbook said in 2032, white people in the United States would be the minority, and people of color would be the majority. My first thought at that point was, holy shit, white people need to have more babies. Like, we can't become the minority in our own country. That was the end of my denying white privilege, because I didn't even know that I had that thought in my head. And then when I read that, that was my very first thought. And like I said, I am super ashamed of it even at that time. And that's when I started thinking, because my second thought was like, holy shit, where did that even come from? Like, I would not have thought that I was prejudiced or racist or whatever prior to that. And clearly those things existed. And you guys can all come at me on here and be like, yeah, it's terrible. I agree. But you all are the same. All of us white people, we are the same. We might be fighting against it. Like, I'm actively fighting against the prejudice that I have at every moment that I have it. Every moment that I'm aware of it, I am fighting against it. But we all have it. So to this person, Renee in the South, you need to do better. You need to educate yourself, because you're coming across looking very ignorant.
How do you define, like, white privilege?
How would you define white privilege?
Like, getting better access, more opportunities because of your skin color, or like because you're white, I guess.
What system in place right now gives white people an advantage over black people?
I feel like it's less like a system, like institutions, and more just like day to day, like how people act.
No, I hear what you're saying, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people share that same sentiment.
Right.
I just think that it's more of a feeling than a reality. I think that if you look at majority of people, they're not going to treat a black person any different. Do you believe that any of your professors here on campus, does any of them discriminate against you on your grades, the way they teach? Do they treat you any different in the classroom?
No.
Most people's experience is like yours, but yet they feel like somebody else may be experiencing discrimination.
Okay.
And I would argue that it's propaganda more so than reality.
Angela, this is a really good question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it, but I probably don't even fully know how much my white privilege has helped me prosper. I have to back up a little bit because I don't know if you know who Brene Brown is, but she does a lot of work around shame. But she has a video that really affected me. And it was like, basically, she says that the way that you see the world, your lens that you look through the world at, is soldered to your face. You can't take that off. Like, I can't see the world through a Black person's lens. And the way that you do that is you believe people when they tell you about their experiences. That's how you can see the world through their lenses. And so a lot of this has been brought to my attention by listening to Black people, mostly online. But there's one thing that I think about often is like, I have the privilege of going into a store and not feeling like I'm going to be followed around because they think I'm stealing because I'm not Black. And the reason that I think that's a perspective is I've heard Black moms that like tell their kids to keep their hands out of their pockets. And like, it just is gut wrenching to think that somebody has to tell their children that. Here's a great example, and I cannot believe I'm about to tell this story on the internet. When I was like 20 years old, I dressed up for Halloween as a pot fairy, like a weed fairy. Like, I decorated this little like earthy fairy costume with fake marijuana leaves. Anyway, I believe I was 20. So I think I was underage, very drunk, out in public, at a restaurant in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on the phone with my boyfriend. A cop comes over to me and says something to me like, you know, you don't need to be out here on your phone. I start yelling at him, telling him to leave me alone and I can do what I want and blah, blah, blah. At one point, I like took my fairy wings off like I was going to fight him and was like, well, take me to jail if I've done nothing wrong. Like, if I'd have been a Black girl, I'd have been arrested 110%. And I probably should have been. I was underage drinking and I was antagonizing a cop. That's what I think my white privilege is. If it was a Black man, God knows what would have happened. So I think that speaks volumes to my white privilege. But I definitely get to move through the world easier because I'm white. Okay, another one is I grew up in North Baton Rouge in a bad part of town in a trailer park for like 2 or 3 years. We lived there. And back when I had more racist views, I would be like, okay, well, if I can make it because I came from nothing, then anybody else can. So I don't want to hear like how you can't do whatever you want in life. And that was kind of across the board for Black, white, whatever. But what I didn't want to see or didn't really understand is that I also was starting at a much different place than a lot of people. My family does have, I don't know if it's generational wealth, but like my grandparents had money and my one set of grandparents paid off my like $10,000-$12,000 student loans when I graduated. And my other grandfather gave me $5,000 towards the purchase of my first house. And the first set of grandparents paid for me to go back to college and get a whole nother degree. So like, it's easy to cherry pick from your life and be like, well, I lived in a bad part of town in North Baton Rouge and I grew up in a trailer park, but a lot of people didn't have the backing at the end of the day that I had. And so I don't know if that's as much, I guess that is white privilege, right? Because a lot of Black people's grandparents don't have money because they weren't given opportunities. They weren't allowed to have certain jobs. They weren't allowed to go to certain schools and have been oppressed over time. So like, yeah, if the Black person next to me living in the trailer next to me, well, if they didn't get out, then they didn't work hard enough. Well, you know, maybe their grandparents didn't help them. Maybe their grandparents didn't help their mom get out of the trailer park because they had the money to own. And not to mention my grandfather owned the trailer park that we lived in. So that's as real as I can be about it as far as I know it to be.
If you're watching, especially as a white person, I have one particular question for you. Do you believe that white privilege exists? If it does exist, are you enjoying that particular privilege as a white person? Please, I want to know your thoughts because a lot of controversy have actually been going on concerning the white privilege as a white person, specifically in American, right? And let's not confuse white privilege to wealth privilege. So this time around, we're just talking about white privilege. Do you believe it exists? If it does, let us know in the comment section. I'll go ahead and roll out the other clips I have for you guys. Then I'll be back with commentaries.
Yesterday, my son was playing football at school with some white kids and some black kids. And one of the black kids missed a catch. And one of the white kids said out loud, "Well, I bet if it was a certain type of food," I'm not going to say it, you know what I mean, "he would have caught it." And my son got in the car with my wife to go home and asked her what that meant. And it breaks my heart that we continue and will always have to continue to talk about these things with our kids. And it's so important that we do, but it's so sad. Racism, microaggressions, homophobia, humanity, how we treat people. And this stuff is right in front of their face on the football field, in elementary school, good neighborhood. It doesn't matter. It's everywhere. And it made me think about white privilege. And it made me think about the fact that I think I've had it wrong. This whole time I've thought white privilege was about money, and it was about getting into college and getting jobs. And it is those things. But what I don't think I really understood was that white privilege was going through my entire life, never having to know what that kid felt like.
White people making the claim that they are empaths, but they do not recognize their white privilege, financial privilege if they have it, pretty privilege if they have it, are not empaths, okay? They could be experiencing white savior syndrome. They could be experiencing spiritual psychosis. They could be narcissists, but they are not fucking empaths. It would never happen in a million years. No empath could be inside a white body and not be fully aware of the privilege. So...
if you could be any race other than the one you are, which would it be?
That's a great question. Black?
What is your current race?
I'm white.
What is one thing that you take pride in about being white?
There's a lot I look down upon being white.
What is something that you appreciate about black culture?
I just went to a recent concert that had a lot of black artists that I think are extremely inspiring. A lot of what they rap about is something that I cannot experience firsthand, and I'd like to understand it better. And part of that understanding I don't think I will achieve because I'm white.
White privilege is real. I feel as if it's a little bit less in London because we're, a bit mixed up down here. But it's very real when you go outside of London, etc., and the way that it's seen, white privilege will be more so like if you're protected or not, if you're offered things or not. And of course, very much so with the police.
This video is for my white brothers and sisters. Do you believe that white privilege exists? Up until recently, I was living off of $900 a month for the last 3 years, and as you'd imagine, I needed government aids to survive. As for my childhood, I moved more times than I care to count, and if I ate that day, it was usually ramen noodles. You and I, as white people, do not see white privilege, especially if we came from the struggle. We are not privileged in the sense that we are handed everything, because although I came from the struggle, if I was black or brown, I would have had to have dealt with racism on top of everything else that I was struggling with. White privilege is not about what you have been given because you are white. It's about what you do not have to endure because you are white. Over 70% of the United States is classified as white, so we are in general treated as human beings. And although being treated like a human being is not a privilege, it's a right, in general, black and indigenous and people of color are not treated with the respect that they deserve. So to those who are being disrespected by a society, when looking at those who are being treated like they're human, it looks a lot like privilege. Hence, white privilege.
If you're a white person, we need to start getting even louder on behalf of our friends and family who are minorities. Our government has antagonized them to no end. They're ripping up the street that proclaimed Black Lives Matter. They're removing accomplishments from our minority service members off of the Pentagon website. And now our federal government erased a ban on contractors who run segregated facilities. They are trying so hard to enrage our brothers and sisters of color. They want them angry and they want them out in the streets. It is so clear. I'm so proud of them for not taking the bait. I'm so proud of them for staying home and resting. But as they do, we have to fight on their behalf. The Civil Rights Act was only passed in 1964. I'm in my early 40s, but my parents grew up with segregation in their schools. And there's no way in hell, all these years later, we're going to go backwards to anything even remotely resembling that. If places are segregated and say whites only, that's not a place I will ever be. And any line of thinking that keeps us separate from one another is a thinking that we need to reject loudly and wholeheartedly. Nobody is better than anybody else in this country because of the color of their skin. We are not, in 2025, going to sit around and watch as a bunch of people make laws trying to make us go backwards. We have to be the loudest ones. We have to be the protectors. We have to be the allies. We have to be the advocates. We have to be the ones whose voices are the loudest in saying, we will not go backwards, and you will not oppress the minority community. Not on our watch. Not now, and not ever.
Okay, welcome back, guys. After watching all of that clips, so I actually did some of my research as well, asking what is white privilege, how does it affect white people in America, and so on and so forth. And I have some of this short clip here, so I'm going to read it out before we explain, because a lot of people are confusing white privilege to white people not struggling or white people enjoying more, something like that. And let me tell you guys, I also grew up with that scenario of, once I see a white person and I hear of white privilege, I assume that these people are just people specially designed to live luxury lives. But does it really count right now in America? Let's find out. Anyways, with my research here, they said white privilege refers to, this is the definition, right? White privilege refers to the unearned advantage and benefits that white people in America often experience simply because of their skin color. It doesn't mean every white person is rich, powerful, or free from struggles, but it means their race generally does not create additional barriers for them in the society. It simply means if you are not white, your own race is actually creating some barriers. And that is why I've seen that, let me just say 50%, or what's 50%? 70% of the whites are actually highly racial profile, like they are racist, right? Let's continue. Now, let's take for examples of some white privileges. I said, being less likely to be discriminated against in hiring, housing, or by police. More likely to see themselves positively represented in media histories and leadership position. Not having a constantly thinking about race while moving through daily life, right? Now, let's talk about how does this affect white people in America. Now, the first one I have here is unseen advantage. Many white people don't notice the invisible boosts they get. Example, being assumed trustworthy in a store, not being stereotyped or dangerous. Then I have another one here, blind spots. Because they don't experience racism directly, some white people may underestimate or misunderstand the struggles of people of color. The third one is social responsibility. Recognizing white privilege can create an opportunities for white people to support fairness, equality, and dismiss racist system. And I have the fourth one here, guilt or denial. Some white people may feel this defensive, guilty, or even denying privilege exists because it's challenged their belief that success is only about hard working. In general terms, white privilege does not mean white people have no struggles. It means their struggles are less likely to come from their skin color, unlike Black Americans and other minorities who often face systematic disadvantage. You can see here, yes, it does exist on my own end. That's my own conclusion, right? It does exist, but it doesn't mean that all of them are special. It doesn't mean that all of them are enjoying it. It doesn't mean that all of them are rich It simply means they are also struggling in their own end. So, and I'm happy that a lot of white Americans right now, they are waking up to the reality that since this is how the system is, we have to stand, we have to build, we have to make sure that we try our possible best to be able to achieve whatsoever we want to achieve as individuals. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comment section. This is just for educational purpose. This is not to bash anybody, right? And I stand a chance to be corrected. I keep saying it in my videos. And if you have not subscribed, subscribe, like, comment, and share. Every videos and stitches we use in our today's episode credit belongs to the original creators of these videos. And yes, with no further ado, guys, I'm going to be Siba, and I'll see you guys in my next one. For now, bye, guys. I love you. Mwah.